Nicole, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing all right, Albrey. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's finally the sun just came out in Oakland, and after
Yeah,
this, I'm gonna take a long walk just to
nice.
relax for
Oh,
the
that's
rest of the
so
day.
nice. That's so nice. I'm
Yeah.
further out into the East Bay than you, but
Okay.
so it's been sunny and hot here for a while, but
Yeah.
maybe we can get some sprinkles of rain in the next couple of weeks or so. That's the other
Oh,
thing I
yeah.
hope for.
Fingers crossed. Fingers
Fingers
crossed. But
crossed.
it's like
Fingers
the
crossed.
least amount of rain like on record in 2021.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough right now, but I mean, if you're not in California, send us some good vibes. Send us some good vibes. We could use them for fire season.
Please, or just bring a bucket from wherever you
Bring a
are and just
bucket
pour it
or
on
a
the ground.
helicopter with lots of buckets.
Well, I'm
Ah,
really excited to have this conversation with you on, moving beyond performative racial equity in tech. I know you've been doing DE&I work. Actually, I want to start by saying you were one of my inspirations to get into this work in 2015
oh,
when I was thinking about taking on a director of DE&I role. I believe you might
right on.
have been at maybe at GitHub at that. Maybe that was right before GitHub at
2015,
that
yeah.
time.
No, I would have been at GitHub. That's right. Oh,
GitHub,
that's so kind of you to say. Thank you. I really
of
appreciate
course.
that.
So this is a very full circle moment, and I'm sure
Uh,
that I'm going to learn just as much from you as everyone
likewise.
else who's going to be watching
Well,
this in the
I
future.
can't wait to hear what you have to say also. I've been at this for 27 years, Albrey, so you know.
Yeah, it's through the
Maybe now
cycles,
somebody's listening.
right? Right. So I'm sure you're going to have some very in-depth answers about how we got here and how last year became, what I call an inflection point
For
for
sure.
racial equity in the
For
tech
sure.
industry. But just to give some folks context about what we're going to talk about, last year there was a widespread movement after the murder of George Floyd and many other people, Ahmaud Arbery, et cetera, murdered by the police. The tech industry specifically took a step forward in kind of being a collective voice for supporting specifically the Black community through through the tragedy that was the murder of these folks. And this conversation is really going to focus on how both the tech industry did some of the right things in terms of supporting and investing in the Black community, and also some of the, I would say the incorrect response, things that were performative from back in 2020 up until now. Just to give a little bit of background about myself, I lead diversity, equity, and inclusion at Airtable. I've been doing DE&I work for way less time than Nicole, actually 7 years. And
That's a
I
long
was,
time. That's a long time in these streets. That's a
oh
long
yeah,
time.
in DE&I years, that's like 50
The
years.
dog years. Yeah,
And
yeah, exactly.
uh, and I was at a tech company in the midst of this. So I'm hoping to provide my perspective from being, inside the house while seeing all of these things transpire. And Nicole, I know that you have a very long resume doing this for 27 years. So I'll let you introduce yourself and kind of where you were at when
Sure.
the murder of George Floyd and how the tech industry responded.
Sure. So I'm so happy to be on this call with you. And I'm so happy for all the folks who are listening. I hope you get something out of this too. Without going too far into my resume, I have been at this for almost 30 years. And I've been doing DEI work for that long. And specifically in tech, my first job doing this was in 1999. So still lots of questions of how this thing would be monetized. And are we going to charge people fractions of a cent per click? Or, how do we measure eyeballs? And all those conversations really early on. And I had the good fortune of, at my very first tech company where I was doing this, we built an engineering team that was predominantly Native American because we hired folks on a cohort model, and they were out of MIT, and we wanted this guy who just finished his PhD in computer science to come and be our CTO. And he said, "Great, but I'm bringing these people with me." And I said, as the person who was in charge of hiring, I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great, right? Bring them
Oh yeah.
all." And they were a package deal. And honestly, I was so spoiled. Didn't
Mhm.
know, spoiled. I caught an early taste of what it could look like if we really did shift the industry, if we really
Mhm.
did have like massive representation in ways that we don't currently and haven't had since. And you know I got to see all the ways early on that people's best intentions get thwarted, and especially get thwarted by money. And that's not a secret. I mean, that's kind of the history of this country in which we live. That's a hell of a dynamic. And so
Yeah.
I feel like in the last 27 years, I keep getting close to where we could be, where we could realize and leverage technology for the good of the most vulnerable among us in the world. And every time we get close, some investor would drop a whole lot of money, and then it's like, just people just scatter. Yeah, I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
or, oh, it looks like there's going to be a massive exit and all your ideals fly out the window, right? People are just like jumping each other in the dark to try and get a piece of what scraps. And it's been extremely eye-opening and really disheartening. And I will say that the difference between all of that and last year is that for me, we just ran some data recently. In the last 12 months, I have led one conversation on race every 2.8 days or so in the last year. And we've been inside 40 companies and organizations. And so I have a lot of data points about what's different this time. And the snarkily, I wish I could remember who the first person who said this to me. I can't be credited with it, but that what we experienced was a great white awakening. And that the conversation that a lot of us have been having for a really long time, right? 500 years worth, let's say, thereabouts, that with mainstream white America, it caught up. It became undeniable. And millennials, white millennials in particular, but not exclusively white millennials, are now so much of the workforce. And quite honestly, there's a lot of data that tells us they're just way less scared of the things that previous generations have been around race. And they have really led the charge on the conversation. And it's always been people of color who are out front. And, and so now everybody's kind of catching up to that, especially, Black women in particular out front, and everybody's catching up to it. And so the work was really about saying, oh, they're valuing it now. We can actually make a living off of teaching people the stuff that they should have learned in school. And the difference has been, I would say, well, it's not so much like we've seen massive change. I've seen massive change in the conversation. So not necessarily massive change in action yet, but the level of conversation and the level of participation in the conversation is unlike anything I've ever seen. But I would love your thoughts on this question as well.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head. The engagement that I'm seeing from the majority population is unlike I've ever seen. Even when I'm forgetting his name, and I'm very sadly forgetting his name because
Michael Brown.
When Michael Brown was murdered, and there was no response from big tech companies, and
none. That was the first.
And there was a huge chance. I mean, even Twitter, right? Twitter was one of Jack Dorsey was at the protests, et cetera, et cetera. There was the difference between the response 7 years ago and the response now has been absolutely just incredible, at least from the conversation point of view. And I think as we talk about this thing, this topic of being performative, right? I think that's where we're at the intersection of engagement and action, and what does performative mean, and how can we move past that moving forward? So, I think, my thoughts are exactly your thoughts. I've had more conversations with especially white folks over the last year that I've had in the previous 6 years that I've done this job. And it's not just conversation that is about, oh, like this is how badly I feel, like the guilt about it. It's wanting to truly understand the tactical and practical things that they can do to educate themselves, and to kind of reverse the effects of hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years of oppression that has now kind of turned itself into lack of access to the tech industry, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm very excited to see what practitioners like ourselves can do to turn that engagement into action moving forward, because there aren't that many moments that can become movements over time. And although we're a year in, and I've seen a little bit of a difference in momentum from 12 months ago or 15 months ago, I still think we're in this moment that folks are still very much engaged, very much looking inward of how they can change themselves moving forward. So, I mean, on that note of the inflection point, I read one statistic that was done in partnership with Sherelle Dorsey's The Plug and Fast Company, and it talked about all of the money that was given just to quantify the response last year. I read a piece done by Sherelle Dorsey and The Plug and Fast Company. It was an incredible piece. I think it was in June, right after Juneteenth, about how much money and effort was put towards the Black community. And the numbers were pretty staggering. I think it was $3.8 billion put towards supporting the Black community. And I thought something that was really interesting is they put into several sections, education, racial justice, how much money was put towards Black businesses, which I think was the most, it was like $3 billion put towards. But in terms of internal initiatives in education, only like 7% of the money went to that. And, as we kind of get to defining what racial equity and performative racial equity means to you, I know that you're having these educational conversations with, you said, every 2.8 days, having these conversations in companies, which is absolutely insane to me. What have you, discussed with companies about being performative and performative racial equity? What's your kind of like personal definition of that? And how do you see companies kind of acting in that way during moments of crisis and the communities that are in crisis?
Yeah, I can't wait to hear your answer on this as well. I have a couple of thoughts. The first time I ever saw a collective impulse was actually after, it wasn't explicitly about Black Lives Matter, it wasn't explicitly about George Floyd. It was after the election of 2016, in January of 2017, when there was the essentially anti-immigration initiatives, that's the executive orders. That was the first time I saw tech go, whoa, wait a minute. Like there was a collective, even like that one rippled to the top. And I think it was more obvious because it was like there was a disruption to business, right? And it was like, wait, you can't just keep people from certain countries out. They work here, or we need to go there, or what have you done? And so, but they knew there was a justice lens on that, and we saw a couple of interesting things happen, right? Like Sergey Brin showed up at one of the protests at SFO, and I was like, that's new, right? And I remember thinking, oh, there's something a little bit different in the dialogue. And so that, we're in the middle of the pandemic. We didn't know if it was the middle or the beginning or the end of the pandemic, who knows still, to be home by ourselves, right? Or with our families or with roommates or alone. And to witness this moment in history that still drove people out of their homes to march, right? This is sort of Black Lives Matter 2 in the recent, past. And what I saw is that a whole lot of people wanted to get the words right. And they got some of the words right? Black Lives Matter. People started to have breakthroughs around, okay, I get it why we don't say all lives matter, right? But the fear that still exists inside companies, so that some companies would say, well, if we say Black Lives Matter, we have to say police lives matter. And I would say to them, do you think those are do you think those are two equally opposing sides right now? That's sort of like, and so it was another reveal at scale of how white supremacy works, which is like, well, if you think that, then other people must think the other thing, and they have to be exactly equal. And that's not how it works in issues of civil rights or racial justice or racial equity. It doesn't. It means it's somebody else's turn now, because it's been somebody else's turn to have access to the resources, to have access to the leadership, to tell us where we're going, to have the reins and direct us in a way that is different from the certain destruction to which we're headed. And so I saw that inside companies, what white supremacy loves to do first is get the words right and mistake that for the work. And so the numbers that you say are accurate about how much money went, and yet it was only a fraction of a percent of the total dollars committed to the Black community after the murder of George Floyd. And so as much money as it still paled in comparison. People made grand gestures. They said the words, they put things on social media, and then they were like, so that's it, right? So like, that's the work. And then, and then it was like, no, you're at the very, 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 very beginning of this. And now we're in the part where they have to go. So the conversations I'm having are like, you said you'd do this. This is what your own employees are expecting. This is what your customers and clients are expecting. So can we go? And that's what the last really 6 months has been a lot about for me. I'd love to hear your thought on it.
Yeah, no, I think, as you were talking, I was just thinking about the word performance, and if I were to, come up with a definition on the fly, it's when a company and an organization decides to commit to something only when the spotlight is on them to do so. And no matter what that action is, it could be giving $2.6 billion to the Black community. But if you wouldn't have done that without some sort of spotlight being put on you to do it, I heard tons of folks from HR folks. I was in a Slack channel with HR folks, and the biggest question that people were asking, or the most frequent question that people were asking during those 2 weeks, May 25th to, let's say, up to Juneteenth, were, what are other companies doing? And that is the definition of performative.
That is absolutely what I heard.
The words right, so that at the end of the day, now that the spotlight is on us, we can be reactive. We can make sure that when history looks back on us, it wasn't X, Y, and Z company who didn't say something. And I think far too often, as you talk about white supremacy, white supremacy wants to push its own agenda forward and its own reputation forward by using communities in crisis as the pedestal for that. Oh, this company gave this to this organization, yet the company did not spend the time to understand what its Black employees, its brown employees, its queer employees, et cetera, are actually experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and putting funds towards that. And I think when I look at those numbers, when I look at the numbers that Sherelle and The Plug and Fast Company put together, that's kind of what I see. A one-time commitment to the Black community because this thing happened, yet 4% of that money was put towards internal diversity and inclusion teams, or educational awareness, anti-racism workshops that usually end up as being put towards continuous education for employees and advocates, et cetera. And I think that ends up being the definition of performative at the end of the day.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's great.
And I challenge, I think, any leader who is watching this, or any D&I leader, people leader, CEO, COO, to do the work when no one's watching. And I think that's the only way to make sure that you are not being performative. Because without a spotlight, like, what are you doing? Without a spotlight, when I'm not looking at you, when you're not in the headlines, when there's no kind of HR violation that's about to go on, what are you putting investments in this? Because if not, then what you're doing is, it's kind of performative at the end of the day.
I mean, I gave you all those numbers of all those people I've talked to. I have one. I try not to talk about my clients because there's no. They're on a journey, and I appreciate them all. And I really only work with companies that I think can make progress, that are willing to put some skin in the game. But of all those companies, I only have one that has said, our conclusion is that we want to have an anti-racist organization. One. And it's a good one. It's a powerful one in a powerful industry, but it's one. And I thought, okay, well, you're a leader and maybe others will follow, and that will be great. But I'm doing ongoing curriculum work with their whole staff about, like, starting with what is anti-racist. In fact, I'm like, we are all anti-racist babies.
Yes.
I came upon this weekend. I was like, I think everybody should actually read this book, because it's like, and it's brilliant. I mean, of course, it's by Ibram Kendi, and so it's brilliant. And you can tell he's talking to the parents. It's like, no one will see racism if we only stay silent. if we don't name racism, it won't stop being so violent. And I can just imagine like people who've been doing the performative got the BLM sticker in their front window. They got a maybe like a BLM, t-shirt, and they're like white liberals somewhere going, oh, this book is way scarier than I thought it was gonna be. Oh, we have to do
this
that.
for babies.
I know we have to do that, and that way we're talking. There's some redistribution of resources in here. What the hell? And you can just imagine. It's like, because listen, we know what this structure gets us. We know what this structure gets us. And so one of the first things I have to do when I go into companies is say, if you take this work on, it should change the shape and strategy of your company.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be shocked when somebody then raises their hand and says, for example, hypothetically, why are we selling our software to ICE? When you're flying a flag of, civil rights and putting, Gandhi on your wall and talking about like the legacy of Cesar Chavez, and then someone goes, okay, great. So why are we selling our product to ICE?
Yeah. Don't be offended. It's like, be ready.
Come out.
Be ready to do the work that your words are really setting you up for. And I think, I think this is a good segue into the question of, this company that has kind of stepped up and said, hey, we want to do the work of being anti-racist. What's a system or a practice or a process that you would have them focus on that can either be changed or revamped or removed that you think would have a really positive effect on put them on the path towards becoming anti-racist or becoming a more equitable environment for especially underrepresented folks?
Yeah, I'm very dogmatic about this, and I know I probably should be less so, but I'm all about starting with building psychological safety. You can't go anywhere. You can't go anywhere. You can't run a great team. You can't help people realize their full potential. You can't do anything without psychological safety. And psychological safety means it's okay to take risks with my manager or in this company or in this. And this company in particular was finding it hard for people to dissent. And so they would start to work on a project and someone would go, this feels weird, right? Like a Black employee would raise their hand and go, I don't think this is going to fly in my community. Right. And other Black folks are also saying, yeah, we're getting into some dicey territory. So what is the new mechanism then for if that happens? And not shockingly, none of the Black folks are in executive leadership. So what is the mechanism by which we make it okay for people to raise their hands, say that, and be listened to and considered? Because I know for a fact, after working in lots and lots of organizations, people can disagree with decisions of leadership. They can be disappointed. They can think you should have done something else, but you can't get back the feeling if something is unfair or opaque. And if you don't know, and you feel like you're standing on psychological quicksand, right? Where you're just like, I don't know, sometimes it's okay to say something, sometimes it's not. Maybe I'll just shut up. Being quiet is the easiest thing. And then you've shut down all of these voices. So you can't even enter into a conversation that is safe about race, about racial aggressions, about systemic racism, about interpersonal racism, until you know that you're standing on firm footing with people that you can trust, even if you don't like them. You understand the culture into which we have all, consented. And in this culture, it is okay to take risks. It is okay to give hard feedback. It is okay and here's how we do it. It's not your way or my way. It's a third way to build psychological safety across difference, because there is no greater mechanism for lacking trust than when racial difference is present. And that's work from UC Berkeley. Dr. Sandra Susan Smith is a researcher there in sociology and said, I can't replicate mistrust between two strangers more widely than when racial difference is present, and specifically when one person is Black and one person is white. And so she measures the gap and goes, yeah, it's literally the thing that makes us mistrust or distrust each other the most. And so without psychological safety at the root, you can't move forward towards anti-racism. And that's the thing that we've been talking about and unpacking and training managers on. How do you build psychological safety on your team? And how do you dissent in a way that says, I'm scared, but I'm dissenting? How do you recognize that? How do you consider it in your decision making? And so it's those kinds of mechanisms that I like to spend a lot of time on.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about you? What
No,
about you? What's your, like, where are you starting? I mean, I know it's probably, you maybe can't say all the things that you're doing, but like a couple of things maybe that you've seen work well, whether it's at your
yeah.
company or another one.
Yeah, I think in terms of a process or a system that I think is that if we got rid of it today, a lot of our challenges of especially getting and keeping more Black and brown folks in the industry is getting rid of referrals.
Oh,
I think referrals um, are the most one of the most interesting practices that I think companies invest in, especially with the backdrop of also saying that I love and I invest in diversity. We all know the numbers, and anecdotally, we all know what our networks look like. And um, a ton of companies that I've worked with as a consultant, as well as that I've worked at, both kind of talk about how much they want to make sure that their workforce is as diverse as possible, but they then measure the progress of their recruiting goals, the health of their company by one question: would you refer this company to another person in your network? And that is
that's it.
the main.
That's the question.
That's it, exactly. And if we continue to use that question and use that metric of 40, 50, 60% of the folks that we hired last quarter came from referrals, it flies in the face of what we know about diversifying a company. So if I could choose one thing to just like wave a magic wand and get rid of, it would be building out referral networks. I believe it's lazy recruiting. I believe it's somewhat disadvantageous to hiring what we consider the best talent at the end of the day. Just because I know someone can work in this context, X context, doesn't mean I know that they can work in Y context. And I think it's the largest barrier to getting folks who are different, whether it be neurodiversity, whether it be caregiving status, whether it be folks who are veterans, not even talking about race, gender, et cetera, into positions of power. Because we all know that tech has this pernicious merry-go-round of, once you're in and you know somebody, if they go to another place, you go to another place. If you go to another place, they go to another place. And it ends up being very, very disadvantageous to folks who are outsiders. And that more than likely ends up being folks who are underrepresented, which comes back to the word underrepresented because of the lack of network.
Right.
I think,
I'm like, my people are not underrepresented in California. My people are underrepresented in tech. My people are underrepresented in leadership, in whatever, land control. But we're here. We're here. I would love to get rid of that. And I wish, I'm just going to throw this out there. I said at the very beginning, hiring on a cohort model is this. I have had tremendous success hiring on a cohort model where you do leverage that idea that if I go there, others come with me, but with strategic networks. And I'm not just saying, oh, Albrey, you're Black, so can you bring some Black friends to my company with you? It's not that. It's watching how leadership blossoms. I mean, if you're at all fluent in Twitter, you're at all fluent in tech, in how tech relates on Twitter, you want to know where there's some key individuals going, because other folks from underrepresented backgrounds will gravitate towards them. Yep. And if you said, oh, you don't want to be the first Black woman on this engineering team, well, what if we hired a cohort and you built a team of 4 people that we hire all at once, so that you all can build psychological safety from jump and not be alone? Who would you bring? Let's do this. And I don't understand, because you talked about, there's so much hiring going on in tech, and there is a lot of need for, as recruiters lovingly put it, butts in seats. But if you're really gonna diversify and you really have to put butts in seats, why are you not trying to hire groups at a time? I don't understand. And then we know from all kinds of things. We know about the social benefit of having folks in my personal community network, right, who are underrepresented like me, vis-a-vis employee resource groups and affinity groups and all that kind of stuff. Those are good for retention. Those are retention strategies. And so they go, well, no, I just want the best person for every job. And I'm like, that's not an objective anything. There's no finding the best person for anything, ever, for anything,
Yeah.
period. And so get over that and come up, be creative with some new models. And so, yeah, that's very frustrating to me.
Yeah, I love that. And to your point about, I think this kind of goes back to performative racial equity and making sure that you're doing the work, getting rid of this notion of the best, getting rid of this notion that anyone who's going to come in, or even this notion of better at the end of the day, because people have very, very different skill sets, and there's no way that you're going to be able to comparing humans. Unfortunately, everyone thinks it's apples to apples, but it's not. It's apples to oranges. Every human is going to be a little bit different in the way that they execute something, or they bring something to the table, or they grow, et cetera, et cetera. And this whole notion of we hire only the best. Well, if I asked you, if I really pressed you on that, and I do, I press our recruiters on, I'm like, or our hiring managers, I'm like, well, what does the best mean to you? Well, and it typically comes down to, well, they worked at this company.
Or they went to the school, or both.
They went to the school, or they were part of this network. And that doesn't really tell you anything about what the best means. It's a lazy heuristic that you're using to indicate whether someone belongs somewhere, which is the exact reason why we're in the situation that we are at the moment. So I love the kind of flipping that on its head and talking about hiring in cohorts, because now you're kind of getting rid of this like social signaling and just saying, hey, we're going to make sure that we're investing in groups of folks who can come in and grow together, and make sure that when they do come to this company, they're comfortable, more comfortable than they would be going it alone. And two, increase the probability that they're going to be super successful, really enjoy it here, and build a career and a network that they can leverage moving forward. And I think that becomes a positive sum game, rather than something that ends up negating folks folks getting into this industry and taking advantage of a lot of the things that come with it. So I really love that suggestion, and I hope that y'all are taking notes, because that was fire.
Well, here's the other thing that's funny is that, all these red herrings about, well, if we diversify, aren't some groups of people, or if Black Lives Matter, does that mean we're going to piss off the Latinx ERG? And it's like, no, this is a strategy. This is a strategy. We center the Black experience and specifically put a finer point on that. Black women, if Black women are thriving in your company, everybody else is good. That's how it works. And it's about, Silicon Valley loves to be so strategic about everything, finance and the data. And we tell them, okay, then this is how it works. And all of a sudden they're like, well, that can't possibly be. I had one very, very, very well-known VC say to me, well, can't we deal with the girl thing? Then we can deal with the race thing. And I was just like, I can't help you,
Now, what
man.
if I told you this was sales and marketing? They would be like, we have to do it all. We have to make sure that these things work together.
Exactly. Well, there's our market penetration. What's the TAM? What's the TAM, people? And you're just like, it's the same thing with talent. It's the same damn thing. But because we start to do race, because we start to talk about gender or sexual orientation, or whatever it is, or disabilities, whatever it is, and you just see the fear just go. And fear is what I think I've been dealing with for my whole career, is what are you afraid of? What are you actually afraid of? And so if you're taking notes, one of the things that's really interesting is when people throw one of those red herrings back at you, and it's like, well, how aren't the white people going to feel alienated? Which I've been told, if I had a nickel for the number of times I've been told, you're going to scare white people away. Okay, first of all, not possible. Tech is not going to be built without white people. That's not possible. Or Asian folks. So that's not what we're talking about. But if you look at companies that have done well on diversity, equity, and inclusion, employee engagement scores go up for white folks too. It's not like white folks are like, well, I guess it's not our turn. It's like you're going to have a better time too. That's what all the data tells us, is that then you will start to see and be exposed to things, ideas, problems you didn't even know existed in the sector in which you're working. Yeah, I never would have known that if I hadn't been working with Albrey. I haven't been working with Nicole. I totally learned that from them and their lived or work experience or whatever. Their insight is what caused us to go in this direction. So the other thing that happens, the performative piece also is like, let's just count Black and brown people. We're doing great because on this day at this time we had this many Black and brown people. Are those the same ones you counted from last year? No growth. Is it? Did you turn them all over and it's all brand new?
Yes.
And so, yeah.
That's
Go
a
ahead.
really,
Sorry.
really good point, and it also might be an interesting, or I keep saying interesting. I sound like a venture capitalist. I think a powerful point to talk about, which is like, what are non-performative metrics that companies and individuals should be looking for when they are assessing a company's contribution to both diversity and racial equity within the organization. Like, to your point, representation numbers, point in time representation numbers really don't tell you anything outside of how many folks might be in the house. Doesn't tell you how they're doing. It doesn't tell you whether they're blinked twice if you need to come get me. Doesn't tell you about all of the qualitative information that you might need. So what are some of the things that companies should be measuring that you see as being less performative than typical representation numbers that we see in every yearly DE&I
report, all the reports. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would love to hear what you would love to use. Whether or not you're using it in your company, I'd love to hear what you wish what you'd like to be using. But for me, again, like I said before, I go, okay, I want to see all your data on Black women. I want to know hire date, tenure, retention, promotion path, compensation, including equity. And you can just see people just start, because that's what I actually want to see. If you could tell me what I want to see, that's what I want to see. And I would add to it, it's like, well, how about not just women? How about, I'm like, sure, other minoritized genders, right? And I'm like, sure, women plus, let's go. Let's just talk about like not cis men. How about that? How about if we do that? I want to talk about Black folks from a wide range of genders. Okay, well, what about disabilities? Great. I want to talk to Black folks who are, of a minoritized gender who are disabled. You have a significant number of those folks in your company? Well, no, we just didn't, And so inevitably what happens is they'll say, well, we just don't have enough Black women. I'll say, I would love to see your, if it's a big company, I'd love to see your statistics of women at the Black women at the VP level or above. And I would like to see engagement scores. I'd like to see retention. I'd like to see this because I want to treat them like that should be a normal question instead of, well, there's only one. Oh, okay. Well, that's the data I really want to see. But backing up from there, let me see your employee engagement survey data. I want to see your tenure. I want to see exit survey data. I really want to see exit survey data. I want to, if it's good. I mean, I actually even want to see bad service exit survey data because you can tell when it's bad, when someone's just going, no, I had a great time here and now I just want to leave. I want to see responses. Exactly. Yeah. It's like, no, thank you. Can I still put you on my LinkedIn?
Yeah.
I mean, I really want to know about employee trajectory, employee experience from candidate to offboarding and alumni status, but specifically for the most marginalized, least represented people. What's it like for them? That's what I want to know. What do you want to know?
I want to talk to people who've left. I want to understand alumni and how they speak about the company, especially alumni of color. I think, to your point, Black women are the canary in the coal mine at the end of the day. But what Black women say they experience in an organization is typically going to be par for the course for folks who are underrepresented across the board. You can solve those problems. All of the other problems end up being, I don't want to say solved, but you have a roadmap for solving the other challenges. And then I really love the promotion and tenure. I also say, like, how many managers have Black women have had over the years?
It's a great one.
There's a hot potato sometimes that you see with underrepresented folks of like, oh, I'm going to go to this manager, going to go to that manager, go to this manager. Oh, why didn't they get promoted? Because they had 3 people who were speaking different languages that they had to get used to, et cetera, et cetera. And then, the one thing that we look at typically at Airtable are every 6-month engagement surveys. And even if they are good, even if Black and brown folks say Airtable is the best place that I've ever worked my entire life, we still do internal get a third party to do internal interviews with folks who are underrepresented and say, yes, we know that you said that. We do. But we really want to know
Right.
how you feel and how you're thinking, because we'd rather ask the question now. We'd rather understand what we're doing, how we can be better, even if we're doing okay, than in 6 months when you leave us for another company, because we didn't do the work to actually ask. And I think those are the things, as we talk about performative, those are the things that are done without prompt. Those are things that are done without the spotlight on us, so that we can make sure, even when people aren't looking, we're thinking about ways that we can make our organization more equitable, more inclusive, and hopefully the outcome is that people feel like they want to stay at our company for longer. We're very far away from making that a complete reality and coming up with a process that we can do over and over and over again. But we are trying to move away from the things that we just do because Twitter exploded and something happened, and now we have to kind of just be reactive and put a statement out, trying to get ahead of that and be more proactive about the way that we handle and we promote a safer environment for communities of color within the walls of Airtable. So yeah, I just went on a little bit of a rant.
I love it. I love it. I think to put a punctuation on that, ultimately, the people inside your company rather know that you're doing the work inside the company than you got the social media announcement right and nothing's happening inside. There is an incorrect choice, and that is, let's put the entire communications team on something. What are we going to say on Instagram? And nothing's happening inside. You're going to regret that decision. You will never regret not saying something, but your employees can all vouch for this being a great place to work. That's never going to be a problem. And so, I mean, where we're putting our energy is sort of where we think we can control things, and we don't dip our toe into anything scarier. And I think that's a lot of what's going on.
100%. Oh, well, Nicole, I learned a lot from this conversation.
Oh, me too.
I thank you again. This is such a full circle moment, being able to be on this chat with you. Before we go, where can people find you? Twitter, LinkedIn?
Right. All the places. I happen to be old enough to be the first Nicole Sanchez that'll show up on Twitter, but you can usually find me anywhere at nmsanchez.com. That's who I am on line. Also on Twitter, nmsanchez. And my company is called Vaya Consulting, VAYA consulting.com. Thanks for asking. How about you? Shout out those handles, Albrey.
Thank you. You can find me at Albrey-Brown. I think on Twitter it's Albrey_Brown, or my title is Angry Black Man, as you could probably see why during this conversation. And on LinkedIn, Albrey-Brown. And yeah, no consultancy just yet, but if you have a question, feel free to message me and I'm happy to answer. Want to just have a quick shout out and give a quick thank you to REFACTR, to Beth and Erica for allowing us on, and Utsu for helping moderate this conversation in the background. It has been a ton of fun, and I'm excited to watch it back in the future.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was great to be in conversation with you. It meant a lot that you shouted that out at the beginning. So thank you so much, and keep doing great work over there at Airtable.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.